Welcome to Brightly, You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. We're just a couple curious people interested in friendship, ideas, and personal development. This is a show that strives to speak to the curious, to those who long to explore new ways of thinking, reflecting, and being. Through sharing our experiences, friendship, and interests, we hope to impact you to step more brightly into yourself inch by inch. Hi,
Yay!
Amy.
Hi, Tracy.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good today. I had a good thing and a not so good thing happen the other day. We got a last minute notification because our darling granddaughter notified her mother last minute that she had a solo in the choir that was performing that same night. So, and they live kind of far away. So we decided, yes, we could absolutely go. So we drive. It's like an hour. We drive, we get there, and I didn't even think about this. It was still great, and it was great to see her. But when the women's choir performed and my granddaughter sang her solo, everybody was wearing masks. So even though she was up at the mic, you couldn't actually see her expression or her face. Um,
But that's so
and
great that you were able to make the time, and you're so lucky that you're not only like physically close enough to do something like that, but you're just so lucky you actually, you talk to your daughter and that you're close with your granddaughter. Like I know people in my family that wouldn't get the opportunity to even be invited to something like that. So I mean, I know right now is a tough time, but you got to look on the bright side of things. Like it was open enough that you got to see her or hear her sing. Isn't that great? Don't you think that's the better part of that, Amy? Amy, be happy. Amy, it's a joyful time in life. Amy, we don't have problems and we're only allowed one emotion at a time, Amy.
just let me complain, damn it. Okay,
So I don't
sorry.
know if you caught on to that, but me interrupting my friend sharing her feelings, which we encourage each other to do, I'm telling her to just, don't worry, be happy, was an example of toxic positivity. How did it
And
feel,
it was
Amy?
done well done. Well done.
I
I
think I
will
was laying it
say,
on enough, so thank you.
I mean, I actually was very happy just to be able to be there and to hear her, but it I realized, oh, it actually was really sad not to see her face. So, anyways, thanks for letting me use a real example.
Yeah, thank you for sharing a real example. How did it feel for me to, just tell you how lucky you are?
You know what? It was really a weird feeling. It was not a good feeling because first of all, it just felt like it felt like a big hard stop on what I was expressing. And then it was like I just had to keep back, like literally almost backing up and backing up and backing up. And then even though I knew we were going to do something like this, like we didn't tell each other what we were going to say, but it felt like I started to question myself, like, oh, I should, and I knew we were just play acting, but it was still like, oh yeah, I should be grateful that Jackie would call me and ask me if I wanted to go, and
There's
like all
nothing that
this stuff.
inspires gratitude like shame and guilt, right? It's the most
Yeah.
authentic expression of grateful that we can achieve.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Oh
So
my gosh.
the last time in our last episode we talked about happiness warrior
Yeah.
and the importance of kind of choosing your emotions at time or allowing the co-occurrence of good and bad,
Mhm.
allowing yourself to feel joyful and trying to spread that on. When that's genuine, it's beautiful and it's inspiring, and I think it helps people be their more authentic version of themselves.
Mhm.
When it's
I always think, you know what it reminds me of, Tracy? It reminds me of your friend, and I can't remember if you're like accountability partners, what you call yourselves. Um and she said to you, you bring your whole self to work.
Yes.
And I feel like this is like you bring your whole self to life,
You bring
right?
your whole self.
Yeah.
And sometimes people who seemingly mean well, we've assigned morality to emotions, that we have bad emotions and good emotions.
Yes.
And the what we have is undesirable behaviors with negative consequences, and behaviors that allow a greater, what do I want to say? I don't want to say better feeling in life, but it's about experiences. And so when you assign
Yeah.
good and bad, you create this environment of toxic positivity when you don't allow people to feel the negative emotions,
Right.
when that is the human experience, right?
Right.
Right, like we have this emotional circle wheel within us. We are all ends of the spectrum. One of my favorite quotes is, happiness and sadness run parallel to one another. When one needs a rest, the other one picks up the slack.
Oh, I love that.
And
And
so,
what you just said got me thinking about like when people don't allow you to feel the negative emotions, that's just like, nope, half your life is gone now. Like half of your existence is invalidated, right?
so invalidated. So, yeah, so when people put like a shine on everything regardless of what's true, essentially pretending everything's okay when it's not, or telling you everything's okay when it's not, you're kind of forced to be positive or forced not to share. You're silenced, right?
Oh, that's yes, for sure. Force just you just shut down then.
So, I mean, you both said it right now, but then also when I asked how did it feel, in our little skit, invalidated came up.
Yeah.
And so when we feel invalidated, for me, I tend to feel shame associated with that.
Oh gosh, that just gave me chills because I feel like my entire for a good chunk of my elementary school was shame.
Mm.
So well, I went to Catholic
Oh,
elementary
yes.
school,
Yes.
so
That makes yes.
so that does make sense. But I hadn't thought about that, Tracy, and you're right. When you are invalidated, you do feel shame because then you're thinking, I shouldn't be feeling this way.
Or what I was feeling was wrong. It was not
Yeah.
accepted. It's wrong. And
Yeah.
so it makes me think, traditional mental health, just counseling therapy, like just sit down therapy. When you go to a therapist, they're not an expert in what you're talking about. They may or may not have experience. A common thing among marriage and family therapists is like, do I bring up I'm divorced? Do I bring up I've never been married? Do I bring up the
Hmm.
status of my relationship? And they're told like, you can, if that's your authentic experience and the relationship you want to have with your clients, but ultimately they're there to be the expert in the process, right? And
Right.
what I like about going to therapy is it's not even somebody agreeing with me. They can put my problems directly in my face and let me know how I contributed to my issues, but they validate my experience first, right? I will share
Yeah.
something and say, I feel crazy. I felt so alone in that moment. And they'll be like, no, that sounds like an authentic response. And I'm hearing that this is what you felt. Right. And toxic positivity rejects that. There is no validation. There is no, this is what I heard.
Hmm.
I think people assume validation is agreement, and it's not, it's paraphrasing.
Well, and I think too, there needs to be a distinction because I think sometimes what happens with people who are just like, no, be happy, it's fine, that maybe there are some people who all they do is complain,
Yeah.
but that's something different. But also, maybe the reason why all they do is complain is because they're having a really shitty experience.
And maybe it's
So,
because nobody hears them or
right,
demonstrates that they're being heard.
right. And sometimes, I mean, this is a very sort of general way to show it, but even somebody who complains like in a restaurant, at a library, whatever, if you're just like, yes, you just take the time and hear them, more often than not, people just want to be heard. They don't even want you to like fix anything. They just want to be heard. and told that they are right
Well, not even right, but that
in their feeling.
exactly.
Yeah.
There, and so, to me, for that restaurant example, I've worked on the employee side of customer service and so when I'm in that environment feeling like I want to complain, I can empathize and rationalize what they're going through. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I also experience being a customer and I have expectations as a customer. And sometimes all I want is my oat milk chai latte and you're messing it up. And it's a treat for me. I just spent a lot of money and time on it. I waited in line and I feel like you're completely disregarding me. Like it's not really about the chai latte, it's about the experience I was expecting. And
Oh
sometimes
boy, yeah.
to be able to be like, this isn't what you were selling me, right? Like this isn't the expectation. And so like I can see why the employee would complain, and I would see why the customer would complain, and I would see why somebody else would walk in and be like, you guys, it's a really beautiful day. Like we don't have to, like just
Yeah.
worry about it. It's just coffee, right? Like and so I think it goes to the meanings we all assign the experiences in our life, right? And then how other
Oh,
people
yeah.
react to and see and the expectations we hold. But so for me, when it comes to toxic positivity, it it's about someone else trying to control how you feel or trying to control the emotions of others.
Yeah.
It's like this good vibes only mentality that's actually creates really poor vibes in my experience.
Yes. So, do you think I just started thinking about this because you said really a lot of the times it's around the expectations of the experience, right?
Mhm.
So, do you think it helps or nothing helps with a toxic positiviter if you are able to communicate the experience that was expected and then the reality of the experience now?
So like in the moment, like what you maybe could have said to me about how I dismissed your experience, right?
Oh, okay. Actually, I was
No, what did
thinking,
you mean?
well, yeah, I guess that would have been it. I think if I could have then been able to say, you know what, I was really looking forward to this thing, and then I was met with this other thing, and now I'm unhappy. I
Oh,
feel worse than I did before.
I'm I'm a little challenged by that because on the
Okay.
one hand, you should not have to explain or rationalize your feelings.
Thank you.
You don't owe that to anybody. And so, and honestly, in those situations, it depends on your relationship with the person. So
Hmm.
with me, I hope you could, as we're close friends, you would be like, Tracy, I understand you're trying to help me feel better. But I feel really dismissed when you disregard some of the negative things I bring up and the emotions I'm feeling and try and replace them. Or,
Hmm.
I feel shamed, I feel dismissed, I feel guilted, I feel minimized, and then it's up to the other person to control how they feel. I don't know. One of the best things I ever learned in therapy, another one that I learned, is you are not responsible for other people's feelings.
Yeah, I learned that one too.
Yeah.
I have to continually learn that one.
Right. And so, what that means, you are absolutely 100% responsible for your behavior. So, if you go around treating everybody like a dick, then yeah, you kind of are responsible for uh, the environment you're creating
Yeah.
around you or the
Yeah.
responses you might be getting. However, someone can treat me poorly and I still own my emotional response to them. I know it doesn't feel
Oh.
like it. And in
Mm-hmm.
certain long term relationships, there's a lot of complex things around that. But
Yeah.
if somebody treats me poorly, I can still decide not to blow up, not to get angry, not, or what's that Eleanor Roosevelt quote? Nope, I've lost it.
And I never had it, but I think I know which one you mean. And now it'll bother me till the end of the show, and maybe one of us will have it by then.
We'll Google it or something. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, so by
It's none of
spending
your business what other people think of you.
yes, that's one of them.
Oh, not the one you
That's
were
not
thinking
the one.
of.
She's very quotable. We could do a whole show
She
on her.
is. She is.
But anyways, but so yeah, so when somebody tries to create this super positive, good vibes only environment. They're trying to control the emotional state of everybody around them. And that's not okay, right? Like,
Wow. Do you think that they're even aware of that consciously? I bet they're not.
well, and I think in America, it's kind of ingrained in us, right? Like, there's the
Yes.
TV show Community, there's this character on there, Vaughn. He's like a hacky sack playing, no shirt wearing, hanging out in the courtyard of the community college, just, happy, happy guy. And everything is no worries, bro, no worries. But then he goes through a really bad breakup and his heart is broken. And he's actually he realizes people has been teasing him and talking bad about him behind his back. And so the next time something happens and somebody's like, no worries, bro, he looks at them and goes, oh, there are worries. No worries, bro. As like as sad as it is to see him depressed, I would call him a recovering toxic positiviter, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That there are
Absolutely.
worries. And you don't have to
Mhm.
go around just saying no worries, bruh, to everybody.
Well, and I think that brings up another point too, that when you have been someone who's viewed as always positive, that when you're fine, when you like wake up or whatever, and you're like, oh, wait, there's stuff here that stinks. Then all of a sudden there are people around you sometimes who actually don't like that. They're like, no, I don't want to know about your bad stuff. Like, I don't want to hear about the bad
You get a
experiences,
sense for who your true friends are real quick the second you share some negative emotions, stories,
especially if you've
experiences.
been someone who has been positive for a long time. It's that whole thing like, hey, what's wrong with you? Right? What side of the bed did you wake up on?
And
Or,
how unfair is that to expect anyone to control the vibe of your group, your office, the social setting, right? Like,
mhm,
and some people take on that role themselves and they're,
mhm.
toxic positivity in themselves. I don't know if that's a verb, but like you can do it inwards, right? Like you talked about gaslighting earlier. I think people gaslight themselves.
That's what we actually were talking about that last time,
Yeah.
was gaslighting yourself. That it's very easy to do that. Like, oh, someone else has it worse than I do, so I
Mhm.
don't need to feel that way. I should be happier. Look at everything that's happened to me. I have 10 fingers, I have two legs, I'm fine,
Mhm.
right? When maybe something horrible just happened and you're not fine.
Yeah. And it goes about boundaries in life, right? It goes both ways. So like maybe you're around somebody and they just complain all the time. That typical Debbie Downer, negative Ned, and it's affecting you personally.
Mhm.
Then that's somebody that you need to create boundaries with in your life, right? That
Right.
you gotta kind of have to assess like what are you getting from the relationship, what are you able to give to the relationship, and maybe the relationship needs to end. It's not up to you to fix that person, um
Ooh,
right? And
that's right.
you shouldn't be constantly brought into an emotional state that you don't want to be in.
Mhm, mhm,
But at the same time, some of the boundaries might just be like, okay, when I'm at work, I don't share personal life stuff and I don't expect people to hear that.
mhm,
Um, but when I'm with my close friends and I share something, I get to say to them, oh, I really need to vent right now. Or I really need someone who'll just listen. Like I'm going through a lot, it's feeling really heavy, and this is what I need. Are you able to give that? Like, is that okay? And
mhm.
it's if they can't, they can't, but that's how you can kind of set that boundary of expectation of what you need to get.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit because we talked before the show a little bit about like this past year and
Mhm.
how it was almost a different epidemic of that sort of like just ignore what's going on and you should be thankful for things. Um,
Oh, I did it to myself like crazy this past year where I wanted to reach out and talk to people about the experience I was going through, but I also know they were going through hard times, and so I didn't because I didn't want to be
yeah,
one more burden or one more thing. I've since
yeah.
learned I feel better when I can help my friends and be that shoulder for them, and that most of them feel the same way about me. Um, And most of my friends were, I'm pretty good at being like, hey, can I vent? Like, and just like setting that stage, like, I'm going to self combust. I got to get this out.
Mhm.
And there's been a few times where it's been like, oh, I'm in a meeting right now. I really can't, like, so I don't blow up their inbox or their text. And then we set up a time for later.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so healthy, Tracy. And I need to get better at it because I do have friends who will say that to me, and I am open for that. And plus, if somebody says, can I vent? Then I know what to expect too. And I know, okay, Amy, get the, well, how can I help you hat off your head and just get your listening ears on, right? So I think that a part of it too is communication and the things that we just I feel like communication is something we all need to get better at.
They
And
don't teach it in
luckily,
schools, do
no,
they?
but luckily we're in Gemini season
Ooh.
and will still be when this airs, I believe. So that's a good time for communication. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about too was just kind of this whole, it was almost like I feel like forever, many people who are privileged, many people who are white, will often try to sugarcoat everything and be like, there's no racist things
Oh, yeah.
going on. And you need to just look at the, love and light and only concentrate on the good stuff when it comes to um, communities who are suffering, Black communities,
Mhm. There's a
people
lot
of
of racial
color.
prejudice within the toxic positivity. I
Yeah.
don't want to say movement, but experience. Like,
Yeah.
because toxic positivity is a way to cover up and silence experiences, right? And it's really uncomfortable to talk about racial disparities, economic disparities,
Mhm.
disparities. Like, it's hard to be like, oh, things are really hard right now, but somebody else has it harder, right? Like, it's it's so much easier to lump everybody into the same pot and presume we're all going through the same thing together.
Yep. And then just cover it all in light and ignore
Yeah,
everything.
and that we have the same tools to get through it, right? That
Right.
we have the same emotional state and experience to get to it, through it, the same support. It's just ridiculous to uh, the effects that it can have and just kind of trickle down.
Yeah.
And especially in a time like 2020, right? Like, it really highlighted the disparities even more.
Right.
And how many people just wanted to focus on like, oh, well, you get to work from home, you get to do your laundry, you get to make your own meals, there's no traffic, climate
Yeah.
change
And
is
some people,
better.
meanwhile, some people maybe didn't have, Wi-Fi at home or couldn't work from home or had
Or
3
the
jobs.
kids' meals were primarily from school, or they
Exactly.
didn't have the ability to work from home, they didn't have the ability to still have childcare to some, degree, or
Mhm.
their employer didn't allow them to do childcare
Right.
during it,
Right.
and imagine the people who actually had COVID exposure and had to wait on COVID tests and,
Mhm.
had even more put on them, just having to isolate more and for longer and with potentially no pay.
Yeah.
I knew I felt really secure because our employer got some sort of grant as part of, a
Mhm.
federal program. And so I knew right away if I got COVID or if I couldn't work because I'm waiting on a test, if I couldn't go somewhere and do something, I still got special PTO for that. Right. Like, I knew my income was going to be okay.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
but then that also allowed me, when I was going through other negative side effects, like I said, to negatively use positivity against myself, right? And it reminded me, some of my experiences as a recovering toxic positiviter, or with trying to or having to call out people in my life. I was let go from a job about a decade ago, and I I got another one pretty quickly, but it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was an insane boss. It was not good working conditions. There was very little to be grateful for aside from a paycheck, which I very much earned. And everybody kept telling me, because we were post recession, just be lucky you have a job.
Oh, I
You
know.
can't complain about it, Tracy. You're just so lucky to be employed. So many people don't have jobs right now. And so I carried that with me, to this year where you're just so lucky to
Mhm.
have a job. Well, you know
Yeah.
what? A job is only a fraction of my human experience right now, right?
Right. It is not your whole life or your
No.
whole self.
But then I also had to just realize, like, I used to be that person. I used to study cognitive behavioral therapy and used to tell everybody, if you can't change things, just change the way you think. It's just about changing the way you think. And now I look back on that and cringe because it's no different than when people
Mhm.
are just that whole gratitude movement of
Right.
like, just be thankful. Just if you say three things you're grateful for every day, you'll just be a happier person.
No, I will say, I mean, there is a place for things like gratitude and
Oh,
changing your
yeah.
mindset, but not at the expense of
Don't weaponize it.
experience it. Don't weaponize it. Oh my God, I love that so much. Don't weaponize it. I'm going to
Weaponize
use that.
gratitude, man. Don't use it to make yourself or others feel bad.
Well, right. And I think we've said this before. Don't feel bad because you don't feel good. Like, that's horrible.
Don't layer that on.
Right.
And
I,
like I can be grateful I'm employed and my financial needs are covered and still think my employer is the Satan and I'm in
yeah.
hell on earth, right? Like,
Right.
and I
It's
think
just
there's
another room in the house that is my life. Yep.
and it goes back to what you say earlier, like a difference between complaining and venting,
Yeah.
right? So I went from never complaining about my job outside of like, oh, I got to work late today. Sorry, I can't go out or something like that, to having some real concerns and issues and mental health issues from this. Like other people that left that employer reached out to me on LinkedIn once I was gone too and was just like, hey, how
Whoa.
so and so treated you is not okay. And I was like, well, hey, how he treated you was also not okay. Like it was a very toxic and an unhealthy environment. And so, like, yeah, I found many things to be grateful for, and that's what got me through my day to day. But hearing from my friends, like, I don't want to hear about your issues anymore,
Yeah.
even though it's affecting your physical, mental, emotional health.
Yeah.
It was so
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I um want to honor the memory of my mom while also just saying, I learned from the best. So for me, growing up, now granted, I know that I talk about my mom a lot, and she actually really was pretty magical. Like, we look for fairies, for goodness sakes, right? But when I got to be like a teenager, and she was deep into kind of like the positivity and giving like, I had a mother who gave talks on positive thinking, okay, and when she was younger. When she was older, then she did it on the myths of aging. But so this is on, positive thinking, goal setting, accomplishments, time management, dressing your best, like all of that stuff, right? And so I can remember like waking up and you're 16, for goodness sakes, your whole entire existence can sometimes just be horrendous, and being like, just sad or crying. And she would say, look out that window, see that sun shining, you have two legs to walk on and two arms and this and that, and you can see the sun. And I'd be like, okay, I can. And then I'd feel a little bit bad because I still felt bad. But sometimes she actually would make me feel better. So there was that part of me that was like, well, it does work sometimes. You
Was
know what
it
I
what
mean?
she said, or was it her general mood and attention?
Well, see, that's just it. It was never, I think it probably was her general mood and attention. But so then I took that and carried it forward with me, right? To
Okay.
where I was always the happy one. I was always the positive one. Oh, you have to think about it like this. Oh, you have to do that. Um, and I can remember going to therapy and talking to my therapist, and she basically said, you are denying your husband your full self because,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, because you are only showing him one part of yourself. And that is still hard for me to this day because I think I set a precedence that was like always happy. Look at me laughing now. So that if I am upset about something, um, it's always a little bit like, oh, okay, but honored as well. But I think the other thing that happened is when she told me that, then I was better able to allow that in the people around me, especially my kids,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So if my kids were just like down about something, I wasn't about to be like, no, you must be happy. Well, if any of them are listening, they're probably like, you did so do that. I tried not to. Let's just do it that way for the most part. And especially now that they're adults, absolutely I allow all feelings, right?
Well, one of
Um,
my favorite things to do with my niece, because I think I've shared this before, she feels everything and she feels really
Deep
big.
feeling.
And so
Yeah.
that's both ends of the spectrum. And so
Yeah.
when she's feeling, the not so happy stuff, instead of being like, oh, she's just a little teenager. I mean, she's not, she's 9, right? Like, oh, she's just emotional. Oh, she's just that. Just like go and tell her, like, I love you and I understand what you're going through something. You can either choose to hide here in the corner by yourself,
Mhm.
or you can choose to come with me and we can work through it together, right? Like, and then just hold
And
space.
I love that you give her a
It's
choice.
a choice. Hey,
Yeah.
sometimes I just want to stay in bed and feel bad, like
Right. Right.
sulk a
My
bit, and it
pajamas all
helps.
day.
And so, like, just I know we're a personal development podcast, but not everything's about growth, damn it. Like sometimes it's just about accepting where you're at.
Well, but I feel that that is growth. I think the fact if you can accept where you're at and you feel the feelings, like we don't say that every episode, that you can sort of you can look at them and be like, okay, I am feeling this. Why am I feeling this? And it's okay to be feeling this. And it doesn't have to right away be like, how can I fix feeling this? It can just be sitting in the feeling,
I
right?
think one of the hardest things to be both with ourselves and other people is genuine, because we're taught to be a stereotype, we're taught to fill
Yeah.
roles, we're told other people have expectations of us. When
Yeah.
honestly, I prefer hanging out with the genuine people than the just fake happy people all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like it's yeah, you can express and experience joy and happiness. I'm not saying don't do that. And you can experience those
Right.
emotions around people experiencing the parallel emotions, but it's how you communicate
Yeah.
and how you respond to other people. So,
I think too, it's like just being aware of other people around you, the people who are connected to you, the people who are related to you, your friends, and to just kind of I think that if you get in touch with your feelings, that it's easier to realize what someone else might be feeling and not to immediately try to jump in to save the day,
yeah,
right?
you don't need to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And so often I think people feel like they're helping. I'm helping them feel
Of
better.
course, and that's the hard part too, because so often it's coming from a place of love, a place of wanting you to feel better. But but it but the person getting it from you only feels like we talked about before, invalidated. So that does not feel like love. It does not feel like
Yeah.
feeling better.
And I'm not saying I'm able to do this every time. And it definitely depends on your relationship and the experience you're having. And I actually find it easier to do with people I don't know super well. It's been really challenging with my family, but instead of immediately coming up with my response while they're talking, I try and actively listen. And then when there
Mhm.
is a space where it's not just them thinking, not just them feeling, but like a space for a response, I say, do you know what you're looking for right now? Would you like advice? Would you like support? Did you just
Tracy,
need to get it out?
that
And
gave me chills because if someone were to ask me that in the middle of me bearing my soul. And if they just said, do you know what you're looking for right now? I just feel, first of all, that statement would validate everything I'm going through, but also open up room to think about, what am I looking for right now? And obviously, this is a person I can trust to say what I'm looking for.
Mhm. So, it's about that mindfulness, right? So both
Hmm.
mindfulness is the person maybe going through an emotional experience and knowing that you have that safe space
Yeah.
to exist in, like you just shared, and then also being mindful that you are being a safe space, that when somebody is sharing something
Oh,
like this with
yeah.
you, even somebody who you might think complains all the time, like you've been designated as a person to receive this information. Like how can you best hold the space for the person?
Okay,
um
no, I love that. I'm always going to think that. Now, I've been designated and I take that role with
yeah,
honor.
like it's so easy, and I do, providing perspective. It sounds like what your mom tried to do. Hey, you got legs. Thanks,
Yeah.
mom. My issue isn't about walking, right?
Well, and I think part of that, sorry, I
No, go
totally
for it.
interrupted you, but I think part of that too is that my mom grew up during the Depression. She spent a good chunk of her childhood in an orphanage.
Wow.
So this is not a woman who, grew up with like 3 meals a day, even, or, so she went through some bad stuff. And so I think that for her, it was like she almost had to look at things like that in order to go on with her day. And so she wanted to share that with me. But like you said too, it I think the reason why it would work sometimes was because I knew that she loved me and cared for me and was there for me. Because I did go to her, with tears in my eyes, and she wouldn't be like, buck up, but still.
And it has to be hard too to see your child upset, right? Like
Yeah.
that has to
Yeah.
be like a
You're right,
primordial
Tracy.
instinct to want to make them feel better.
Yes.
And there comes a certain point in the relationship, and in your parenting journey where you come to realize, that it's actually better to help them develop the tools
Yeah.
to help themselves, right?
Hey, listen, I can remember being an adult woman, being with my mom and one of my sisters, and my sister said something about feeling a certain way, which was not positive or loving. And my mom said something, and Patty said, no, this feeling is allowed. I'm allowed to have this feeling. And I was like, what? Like, it was so, I was just like, I can have those feelings too.
This
So,
feeling is allowed.
yeah, yeah.
So I wonder, not not just your mom, because it's unfair. She's not here to speak for herself, but
Right, right.
like you said, maybe she had to get through that to get through her day. To
Yeah.
me, people with toxic positivity, when I see them, and I don't know if it's, some people in my family call me an empath. Some people think I'm psychic. Like I think I have claircognizance at times.
Hmm.
Honestly, it could just be a response to having ADHD and trauma in my life, and I'm reading micro expressions. Regardless of
We'll
the
just call it magic.
magic. So
Okay.
that magic, when I'm around people, I see the toxic positivity people as people that are just treading water and people that aren't validating or acknowledging their own experience, right? And so it's kind of like the blind leading the blind when they're telling you like everything's gonna be okay, and you're just sitting there like, how do you know, Chad? Like,
Okay, so yeah, I'm having a lot of things come up while we're talking about this because I never, ever, ever thought of my mom as a toxic positive person.
mm,
I always just thought of her as completely positive. But, and I still don't want to, I would never label her that because, like you said, well, first of all, she's not here to defend herself or say anything. And plus, she actually has like helped thousands of people. And with her
There's a
work.
place for it. Cognitive behavioral
Exactly.
therapy can work. I think
Exactly.
the challenge with it, and I think why we've started with the label toxic in 2020 especially, I'm sure it was around before that, but it was making people feel dismissed, invalidated, minimized.
Right.
It was counterproductive, it was restricted, judgmental, there was an element of gaslighting, and then as we talked about earlier, a level of racial prejudice
Yeah.
is also in it. And
Yeah.
so I think that's where you, as you know, a positive person or somebody who just wants to make people feel better. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm an aggressive friend. I
Yeah.
understand. So it's about kind of reflecting on what are my reasons for doing what I'm doing? Did I actively listen? Did I hear them? And we'll have to do another episode on active listening. I have training as a mental health practitioner. I've had training on active listening and I'm still shit at it. So it takes practice. It's really
Ah.
hard to do, right? To just sit and listen and not feel like you have a purpose in that
Yeah.
conversation or in a role.
Yeah.
I think it's allowing grace, whether for yourself or somebody else, to complain, to vent. Like, who cares if we talk
Wow.
about it every day, right? And
Yeah.
then, avoid that penchant for giving advice or providing perspective without checking in first, right? And
See, I love it that you brought that up earlier. I think that's like my favorite thing that I learned just now from this podcast that we're doing is just asking if you can, or just like you say what you said, do you know what you want from this? It's just amazing to me. Yeah.
and and even like, let's say somebody, like, I have a friend right now, several friends, going through the home buying process in an unprecedented market, right? Like, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't just a seller's market. We don't have a lot of houses. We have a lot of people in need of housing and wanting
Mm-hmm.
single family homes, and people are taking advantage of the situation and charging ridiculous prices. And then there's such a demand. People are going in and offering $100,000 more than the already ridiculous asking price,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
And a mindful buyer will know, like, unless I'm going to live in this till I die, I have to be able to resell it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everybody is moving so quickly. They're waiving inspections. They're buying without seeing it. They're just making an offer
Yeah.
immediately. Like, it's such a battle and a fight. And so this is going to be a stressor in her life until she is in the home. And then maybe even after, right? There's going to be a little PTSD with it. And so I try, whenever she talks about it, to recheck in with the need, or at least just try and, like, not just listen to the content, so to speak, but like, why is she sharing it right now?
Oh, I love that. So even though maybe she shared something about this experience with you before, every time she brings it up with you, you're still going to check in on what the need is with it.
Yeah, and sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it before. I like to share information. So sometimes I find articles or podcasts or TikToks related to it. And
You're the
sometimes
connector.
I'm the connector. And so sometimes I look at it and I'm like, ooh, now is not the time, right? Like, based on what
Nice.
she's going through right now,
Yeah.
it's not the time. Would it be helpful? Yeah. Could she use it? Yeah. It is not the time. She is an adult who's perfectly capable of figuring this out on her own, right? Like, she comes to me for friendship, support, validation.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
other times when we're talking, I'll be like, "Oh, did you see this New York Times article? Like, feel better, but they're forecasting better times ahead, right?" But also, I trying to predicate all of that with, "This sucks," or
Right.
"You're
Right.
going
That
through
takes a
this."
lot of discernment, though. And I don't know that I think that might be a muscle that will need to be built for some people. Um,
Especially in person. And so I would start with, instead of, we all kind of gear ourselves up to talk, right? Like, oh no, what am I going to say? It's going to be quiet soon. It's going to be quiet. One, allow silence. It's okay if it's quiet. Like, it's weird, but people will fill it if you don't have anything. It's okay to be awkward. These are your friends. But to kind of paraphrase what you just heard. And that's part of the active listening. So they'll say something and then you'll check in to make sure that you're understanding, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
don't even have to be as formal as I am with my friends, but you can say, oh, that sounds like you're struggling with that. Or I'm hearing you're feeling a lot of frustration. Or wow, that's impacting you a lot. And usually, what those things do is that's a connector for them to get from the I'm talking about content to getting to the root cause, the point, right?
Oh,
And
nice.
and so
Okay.
you don't have to have the solution. You don't have to fix
Yeah.
it. Like it'll organically happen if you sometimes it's just parroting back exactly what they said. I heard the housing market sucks, right? Like I heard you complain about XYZ. Um and and so that helps because it's both validating and it relieves that burden of you of having the solution, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It just conversations are hard. Like they don't teach this, and it's gonna be different with everybody you talk to, and
Okay,
even
you're
within that,
hilarious. Conversations are hard. And
they're
I think
hard.
what's happened is we've gotten so used to like Zoom and Teams conversations that now in real life. But the thing is, I still feel like in real life, and especially after vaccination, you have like the touching cues as well. Like, oh, it, I know that sounds weird, but or maybe it's just me who does that. Like when I want to make a point, I'm always like, let me touch you on the shoulder and tell
No,
you this thing.
I just had an appointment and they were cross training someone in. So this is a
Mhm.
professional that works in the field, but a different office doing different things. And so there came a point where there were two of us in the room that they were working with, and where the trainee got to work with me solo on something she's done before, something she knows,
Mhm.
but she kept like I just kept encouraging her like this is how you learn. I've been a trainee before too, like you're doing great, like you're doing exactly what this other person does, like you're fine. And every time she'd touch me and be like, oh, you're so sweet, so like she'd touch my foot, she touched my knee, she touched my shoulder. And so part of me was like, wow, she's so open and engaged and friendly, and I wish I could be more like that. And then the other part of me was like, I learned in 8th grade people don't like that and you should maybe ask. Like and I don't mean that as like a slight to her. Like I had a specific experience of counseling a friend in a
Yeah.
hallway with a teacher. And both of us kept touching, like we were sitting crisscross applesauce on the floor. And when any of us said something or when she said something sad, we'd touch her knee and be, and like, so it was just this alternating knee tapping.
But you know what? It's a different thing with your friends than it is with like
It is.
someone in a professional setting,
Yes.
right? But yeah, I get
and
that.
and so yeah, and we're in a pandemic too, and things like that. So yeah, it's being a human's hard, man.
Okay, yeah, being a human is hard, and it's not like it's going to get easier, right? I mean, maybe in a way it gets easier. I mean, I
What do they call
guess
those
from my vantage point, older than you, I could say that parts of it are easier and then other parts just it's like new parts crop up that are then
yeah,
hard, right?
or
It
you
never
learn where you were maybe not right in the first place.
exactly. I keep learning every day where I wasn't right. I mean, honestly,
And honestly,
but
generations are learning, right? So there's stuff that was okay 30 years
yes,
ago that is not okay
yes.
right now, and
But I
you have
will
to
say
relearn.
yes, but the learning is getting how do I want to say this? It's easier for me to accept the fact that I need to learn. That's what it is.
And I think some people, it'll boil down to, do I feel like I'm being personally attacked and something is taken from me and only I am going through this learning experience? Or, oh, wow, okay, we're all learning. I can do better.
Yeah,
We're all gonna, I just think of pronouns, right? And how
right,
many people have just been like, oh, okay, like I'll do this now. And I'm probably gonna mess up, but I'm gonna do my very best. And other people
right,
that are like digging their heels in the ground, like it has something to do
right.
with them.
And
That's another episode, but
yeah, no kidding. Well, that's an episode where I just be yelling at everyone who doesn't just go right along with it. Anyways,
maybe we do a 5-minute mini episode because I'm there with you on that.
yeah, yeah. Let us shame you about this.
Well, okay, so that's a good point. Getting back to the conversation. So let's say you're kind of watching what you're doing, and again, it's okay to be genuinely joyful, positive, optimistic, happy, things like that. But don't overcorrect into doom, into, oh my God, what will you do?
Oh,
Don't,
so I'm like, oh, I couldn't see my granddaughter's face. And then you'd be like,
oh my God, you couldn't
uh,
see her face? That sounds
because
so
that would,
terrible.
right, that would startle me even worse. I'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, it's worse than I thought it was.
Yeah, so I feel like this is about allowing you your authentic experience while maintaining my threshold and my authentic experience. It's a balance, it is. But yeah, you don't have to, when you're feeling empathetic, you don't have to actually feel that emotion that person is going through, right? Like empathy is about understanding.
Right,
Um
right.
and yeah, and so there's a time and a place for that hyper positivity.
Right. So I think that that is a good point to say, like, you do want to feel that empathy, that compassion, and not the sympathy to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's horrible.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll try and post this with the episode. Brene Brown has an excellent video she did with RSA on the difference between empathy and sympathy. And it's animated
Mhm.
and it's lovely and it's Brene Brown. I mean, what more
Oh,
can
right.
you say?
Exactly. Exactly. Sorry,
But
I
yeah,
just had a
so
little visitor. Okay.
but so yeah, have your boundaries in place for yourself and others. Protect yourself and others by asking for and stating your needs. Don't wait for somebody to ask, say to your friend or whoever, like, I need to vent. I just need someone to listen. Or I need to vent. Can you give me perspective? I need to vent. Can you give me validation? Right.
Honestly, I am going to use that from
Oh, I
now
love
on
it.
because absolutely. Yes, you'll be hearing that from me.
And then let's say you're in a situation like you shared in the Happiness Warrior one where somebody discounts your human experience, right? You
Mhm.
don't always have to be the one to stand up for yourself, just if you're in a group situation and you hear somebody being toxic positivity, be like, oh, you don't have to directly address the person. You don't have to be confrontational to get the behavior to change. But I
Mhm.
instead can say, you know, oh, that's really nice of you, Karen, to say. Like that's one way to look at it. But Amy, what I heard was you were really disappointed, and I can empathize with that so much. We are in unprecedented times, and it can feel like you're really being robbed of an experience.
Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, you're welcome, Amy. And so, it goes with most things with personal development and stuff like that. Like you just have to model the behavior and the trash will take itself out, right? Like I just
Sometimes it will. Yes.
so that's my episode on toxic positivity.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Do you have a tarot card for us?
I do. I don't know if you'll be able to see it.
Oh,
I was so
okay.
excited to show my new office location today. And then I realized I have black walls, it's little black dress. And then where my window is, it just made one half of my face very shiny. And so I tried to
Oh,
use either my monitor screen or my ring light, but then my office workstation behind me just glue and I was backlit. So sorry, that was a long way of saying here's the card.
oh no, you can see it fine.
Oh,
It's
good. Okay.
perfect.
So we have the 10 of wands. And so in the traditional Rider Waite deck, it is a man. We can only see his back as he is carrying 10 really large, taller than him sticks across a field. He has his head down. It looks like back-breaking work.
Mm-hmm.
But the 10, as we know in the tarot, is like the completion of a cycle, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there are endings occurring. And so, kind of the basic description of this card is you're carrying extra burden, right? So, how
Mm-hmm.
many of us, because of the toxic positivity in our lives, don't even share to begin with? And so,
Wow.
you can become
Yeah.
burnt out, exhausted, full of stress and tension, needing to find a release. And then also this card, you can tell with his head down, he either doesn't know when or how to ask for help. There has to be somebody around who can carry some of the sticks. And then there's a quote that Biddy Tarot included in her description of this card by Lena Horne, and it is not the load that breaks you down, but how you carry it.
Whoa.
That just makes
That
me
is
think
so cool.
we don't need to
Okay.
carry our emotional experiences, right? Like we can ask others to share
Yeah.
that burden.
We
Well,
can
okay,
dole out some of those wands. But
yeah.
so when I saw it, and this is in no way, I do not think that this is in any tarot book, but this is the thought that I had. It was like, here's this person carrying these wands because they've been like, no, let me just get rid of all this stuff that you had.
They're
You
burying
don't
the
need these
body.
anymore, right? So I'm going to take it away from you. I'm going
Oh,
to discount your burdens because you don't need these burdens. So let me just get rid of them for you, right?
I'm just gonna hide them for a minute.
Yep. Yep. And then we can talk about the pretty fun stuff, right?
I love it. That's perfect. So, talking about pretty fun stuff. Hey, how about that
Yeah.
moon?
Yeah.
So, a new moon is upon us for June 10th. So, after the major shifts some of us may have felt with the May Sagittarius full moon eclipse, I think it's a super blood flower moon. So,
Yeah,
so many
it's like
adjectives.
and it's the full moon, it's the last full moon of spring,
So, as we
right?
record this, it hasn't quite happened yet, but as you
Mm-hmm.
listen to this, it most likely has.
Oh, sorry about
That's
that
okay.
time warp.
But so that just that made us think, we talked a little bit in a very early episode about how to use the cycles of the moon to help better your life or just to help be more in sync. And so starting with the new moon in June, we'll talk about how to capitalize on those energies and live by the cycles of the moon. And then we'll do a full moon episode later in the year.
I am so excited about this. I love the moon and I love talking about the moon.
La
And I,
Luna.
La Luna,
La
Bella
Luna.
Luna. So, if this episode spoke to you or your soul, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. Any thumbs up is great. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And as always, that reminds me, we check that infrequently. So if you've already reached out, I apologize and I will go and check that right now.
Oh, dear.
So with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day, but only if you feel like it.
Awesome. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.